Hi all. These are generally conversations between adults after the children have left the table. The language can be spicy and the subjects can get saucy. So if you're ready, this is the Southern Fork. Unscripted kitchen chats and also studio chats with some of the most interesting voices in the culinary South. I'm Stephanie Burt, a food and beverage writer based in Charleston, South Carolina, who travels with her fork to write for a variety of publications, from magazines you might have on your coffee table to the website you love to visit for your favorite recipes. And I'm inviting you to come behind the scenes with me to get to know the people who make this Southern culinary landscape so special. I'm always hungry for the next bite, thirsty for that next sip, and ready for the next conversation. Let's dig in. The Southern Fork is sponsored by me this week. The economic downturn of the last few months has affected some of my sponsors, so at the moment, I'm without one. If you or your brand would like to know more about sponsorship of this podcast, I'd love to hear from you at stephanie@thesouthernfork.com. But until that's resolved, I'm going to use this space to highlight organizations I'd like you to check out. This week, I'm highlighting the work of Feeding America. Each year, this network of food banks, pantries, and meal programs serve virtually every community in the U.S., providing a meal or food for an amazing 1 in 7 Americans. While we're working to answer deeper questions like, why are so many of our neighbors hungry? Feeding America is filling in the gaps with everything from collecting surplus food to lobbying against a reduction in SNAP benefits during this time of high unemployment and uncertain health outcomes. I wrote an article about SNAP benefits usage at farmers markets a few years ago, and it really opened my eyes to the hunger disparity in this country. So I'm glad to support Feeding America. I hope you'll take the time to learn more about this organization at feedingamerica.org, and if you feel so moved, know that there are many ways to get involved. Now, it's time to talk yet another delicacy the sea brings us: sea salt. This time of year, you have to get out early to the greenhouses at Bulls Bay Saltworks. The sun and humidity are already bearing down on the day by 10 a.m., so in order to spend time tending and harvesting the salt farm, Teresa Smithmyer has to be finishing her day in the field then, not beginning it. The salt grows slowly in a few greenhouses on her land, which is a beautiful hobby farm, as she calls it, where plants from passion fruit vines to bamboo to corn are grouped in a way that feels more like a botanical garden, and chickens dart into the shade beside the house, while a goat's in the field next to it, and pigs in a pen till the land for a new garden. In the production shop, the small but mighty salt company ships out a large amount of product relative to the small working space. And at the center of it all is Teresa, a woman whose clear-eyed vision of sustainability and the importance of the ecosystem she's in create a taste of the Lowcountry to bring to the table. Welcome to the Southern Fork.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me out for a socially distant field trip out to McClellanville. We're in McClellanville, right?
We are. We're in the unincorporated part of McClellanville.
Okay. There was a dirt road. I think as a city girl, I'm always like, all right, here we go. This is always an adventure for me. But we are actually sitting in really Bulls Bay Grand Central.
Yes.
Bulls Bay Saltworks Grand Central right now. So what do you call this room? Is it the production house, maybe?
Yeah, we tend to call it the shop.
The shop.
But it's a little bit of everything. It's the packing room and the office and storage.
So we've known each other for years because you've been so generous and given me salt, which I actually used just last night, and have purchased it and have had the boucherie salt and the margarita salt and the red mash salt. So we've been around each other for years. But there's so many questions that I never asked. And we had planned to do this last year and then in April. And then, so we're finally here.
Finally.
So, I mean, the questions are just ready.
Okay.
First, I want to know how many years has it been? Because I feel like it's around 5.
It's more than that. It's been since 2012 when we very first started. And, that was really farmers markets and much smaller production. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's been 8 years.
Wow. And farmers markets are where a lot of small artisanal food companies began, from pop-ups to food products like yours. Did that give you a nest egg to really help and grow? I mean, it's a lot of work.
I wouldn't say that it gave us a financial nest egg, but it really gave us a doorway into being able to share our products with the community and getting our brand out there. Mm-hmm. It was actually really crucial.
Good. Mm-hmm. So you knew, based on that reaction too, that you were, okay, this is something we can do.
Right.
Okay. We've gone through the greenhouses, and basically you mentioned to me, hey, this is going to be underwhelming when you drive out here. It's not really, because I love to see. It it's very important for me to eat the food and see where things are made in order to be able to write and talk to my listeners about it. But it is large black tubs inside of a greenhouse evaporating. You're
right.
going to walk into water evaporating, and you know what that looks like. So,
yes.
And there's a chicken. So and that's probably a rooster. How did the idea of salt crystallization capture your imagination? Because it has to still be doing that in order for you to build this business for 8 years. Can you talk about that moment when you thought, I can do this as a business, or I want to do this, or I'm fascinated by this?
Well, I've always been interested in growing things, and growing salt is really not any different than growing vegetables. So when we happened upon doing it by accident, it was an intentional effort to try to make salt from salt water. But we didn't realize that it was actually going to be nice and work, and that people would want it.
Other than yourself, because you were trying to be sustainable and close loop, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I think the moment came when, and a lot of people have heard this story before, but I think the moment came when we were actually having a hog roast and decided to brine the hog in salt water. And we had leftover salt water, and so we boiled it on the stove to try to get salt to season the hog with as it cooked. And it was successful. And it was kind of a big moment of just, wow. Like, okay, that was pretty easy to do. Surprisingly easy. And so we seasoned the hog with it as it cooked, and then eventually smoked the salt with the hog on the smoker. And so then all of a sudden we had these two things going on. And
the hog and the salt that was smoked that you could use later.
Right.
Right.
And at that time I had a fairly large garden, and I was selling vegetables to a small CSA group of people, and they were at the hog roast, and people wanted to know if they could take some home and if we were going to make more and if they could buy it. And it felt like ta-da. Like, okay.
It felt like, okay, I'm being pulled in this direction, right?
Right.
I always ask for obvious.
Yeah.
It felt obvious.
And in the beginning, it was really just, we're still bootstrapping all the time, but it was a real kind of rushed beginning because everyone I actually had a store call me and request it before we were even close to that point because they had heard about it. And I was like, yeah, no, we're not ready for that,
Right.
but maybe we should get ready for it.
And then you knew, right? But there's so many people that I encounter in my work who have such a great recipe from their family, or they have such a great idea like this. And there's so many steps between getting it to that store. There's packaging. There's figuring out where to find the packaging. I mean, before the internet, that was a bunch harder.
Right.
But with yours, there's different grades and different types of salt, and specifically a grinder sometimes. And so if anybody who buys whole spices knows, some of those grinders are crappy.
Yes. We went through probably close to a dozen different grinders until we settled on the one that we really felt was quality and could be refilled. That was kind of the biggest thing because we didn't want all this disposable plastic.
Right.
And having a refillable grinder was critical. And then one that is going to continue to work long enough to be refilled and refilled and refilled.
Right.
So it was a challenge, but we eventually found it.
Yeah. So that's a good point. And I just didn't even think about that I refill mine. So, right. Yeah. That's wonderful. Now you get the water from Bulls Bay.
Yes.
And Bulls Bay is a very, very special place, and it's part of the bioregional kind of hollow that we are in right now. It's a bowl that kind of drives this whole ecosystem up here in McClellanville and Georgetown. So can you talk a little bit about why the water is special in Bulls Bay?
Sure.
And not to just do it from your child's kiddie pool.
The water in Bulls Bay is saltier than a lot of the surrounding waters because it's buffered by, on the land side, it's buffered by the Francis Marion National Forest. And that's over like 225,000 acres. And if you're looking at it on a map, there aren't any big rivers or streams that feed into or through that section of land. So the water is saltier. It doesn't have it's not exposed to runoff from rivers and streams that would not only dilute it, but potentially bring in, any contaminants. And the shellfish, if you live in this area, people know that the shellfish that come from Bulls Bay are like unmatched.
Like Caper's blade.
Yes.
It's my favorite oyster in the world.
So
far. I'm happy to keep trying to find new ones. Sorry. I got off track there. I was thinking about oysters.
Well, and oysters are wonderful because they also filter the water.
Right.
So we have the benefit of being able to piggyback on the knowledge of the fishermen, the people that work on the water, to keep track of the quality because, shellfish are so susceptible to any contaminants or any, water that might not be healthy.
Right.
And the fishermen have to keep up, with DHEC and monitor the areas where they collect the water to make sure that those areas are clean and open. And so we collect the water from Shellfish Area 7A. And while it's not required for us to monitor that, we do anyway, just, for best practices to make sure that, we're really getting the cleanest, best water we can get.
Now, I was fascinated that salt goes through these different stages, and that natural salt has so many different minerals in it. Can you talk about the different stages that you showed me outside?
Sure. So when the salt first starts to form, what we see in the very beginning is really small crystals floating on the surface.
So it's like a skim.
It really is. Like until you touch it, it doesn't look like much.
It looks a little bit more like mosquito eggs on the top of I know what those look like.
Right. They're just
larva,
yeah, right.
larva, I should say.
It's just these really, really small pieces floating on the surface. But when you run your fingers over it, you can capture that on your fingertips and realize, oh, this is salt. That salt that first starts to form is very high in calcium. And as it forms, they turn into small crystals and gain weight and then sink to the bottom. They sink to the bottom and they continue to grow larger and larger until we're ready to harvest them. Mm-hmm. And we prefer to harvest the salt before all of the water has evaporated because the very last flavor, I guess, if you will, or the last element that would settle into the salt is magnesium. And the magnesium can be very bitter. And
it's also a slightly different color,
it can take on a pinkish or a yellowish hue when we get down to the very bottom of that amount of water. And magnesium wouldn't hurt you to have in your salt, but by removing it, we get a cleaner taste because it is bitter. And so if you compare sea salt to table salt, a lot of people notice that there's a real difference in the flavor of the sea salt being cleaner and more pure, whereas table salt can have a sharp bite to it.
Because table salt is mined, not evaporated.
Usually, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And, we could leave that magnesium in there and it would be fine, but I don't think it would give us as clean of a taste as what we get by removing it.
So you rinse it and then you bring it into hot boxes with heat fans.
Back to
Hello,
hot boxes.
Matt and Ted Lee and hot boxes. They have yet another use here at Bulls Bay Saltworks. So I got the opportunity to talk a lot about hot boxes when I interviewed Matt and Ted about their book, Hot Box. So
it's a fantastic book.
Yeah, it is a fantastic book. And hot boxes, I've gained ultra respect. And now here they are again.
Yes.
So you just put half sheet trays in there with salt and heat fans and since it's packaged by weight, that's how you explained it, right? You need all of that water out.
Right. Yeah. Because it's packaged by weight, it needs to be very accurate in, how much we're putting in each container, as well as, nobody wants wet salt in their kitchen.
That's weird.
I guess maybe you could, but nobody
Well, we have that automatically half the time in Charleston anyway.
Right.
Salt clumping. That's why you see rice and all of the diner salt shakers. But I wanted to ask, can you control the shape or size of the crystals? I know that sometimes I get flaked sea salt versus more big crystals, and the crystals that you have in the, you have a Carolina flake and then you have the grinder, and I'm used to the grinder, but I have had the Carolina flake. And how do those differ in your process? Can you control that or?
Yeah. So there's only so much I can speak about with the Carolina flake because of proprietary.
Yes, of course.
But
we respect that at the Southern Fork.
Essentially, the flake is formed, as the salt is starting to form on the surface. If it gets disturbed in a certain way, and
that's all you can say about that. Let's just use the Forrest Gump thing. But in other words, the short answer is yes, you can control how the salt crystallizes.
Yes, we can control that. And we can also control the size of the crystals based on how long we allow, just flat out how long we allow them to grow.
So just like I had the crystals from the Science Hobbies store as a kid, and they grew into the weird trees and stalactites, which are basically salt crystals, and they were hot pink colored. So those were man and it's manipulated as well.
It's interesting that you would bring that up because those were probably growing out of really rich magnesium saltwater, because we'll find that too if we collect the super rich magnesium water in a bin, it will make salt, but it will be sharp and spiky and almost like, we call them Superman crystals. You know, they're little castles. Yeah, it's really
from the planet that I don't know because I didn't really read anything about it, but
it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so the salt has really, I mean, I'm sitting here in the small shop and I'm seeing Belknap and Garden and Gone and Feed and Wine magazine and The Local Palette and Oprah magazine. Those are all good. This is pretty good, Teresa. Pretty good. So, adventurously, where are some of the adventurous places that salt has taken you, either business-wise or personal geography-wise, that you could never have imagined when you first boiled that pot of seawater?
Wow. I suppose I would answer that by saying this has just been an incredible journey in general. Geography-wise, I guess the furthest it's taken me was to Denver for slow food. But I think it's more of a personal learning journey.
Right.
I didn't go to business school. I didn't know how to run a business prior to this. And so it's really been like a kind of learn as you go type of process.
And that's a nice way to say, make every mistake and then figure it out, figure out that it's a mistake, which is halfway to making it right.
Right. Exactly.
But you have to know, oh, that was a mistake.
It was a mistake. And I've met just such wonderful people as well along the way. People that I probably would have never had, the opportunity to meet otherwise if it wasn't for, salt.
Has that changed how you see yourself? Because you said, I didn't go to business school. I'm not. But would you consider yourself a business person now?
I suppose I have to.
Despite the chickens outside the window that are clucking.
Right. It's an everyday struggle to, because it's a constant learning curve, but I enjoy that. The challenge is enjoyable. And once you overcome one thing, it's, okay, I can do this and move on to the next problem and solution.
Yeah. For me, there's, Tom Hanks, there's no crying in baseball. There's a lot of crying in podcast world. Not today. No, these are the good times. The bad times are like, what is that button? How do I do that? How do I upload that? But you just figure it out each step. So you are upping production now, right? So how many, obviously you're available online to purchase, but how many outlets are you serving now?
I don't know if I have a complete total on that. We do a lot of online sales. We also sell direct to, more than, 30 or 40 like specialty stores. And then we work with two, distributors. We work with Grow Food Carolina, who helps facilitate getting our salt to the restaurants.
And that's a huge thing because people think it's just fruit and vegetables at this food hub. And if you want to learn more about Grow Food Carolina, dig on there in the archives. I have an episode about it.
Yeah, they're wonderful.
They're wonderful, but they make it one stop for you instead of 12 stops.
Right. And they're carrying so much more than just fruit and vegetables now.
Yes.
So they've really grown as well. And so then we work with another distributor, Perfect 10 Foods, and Those are it's the same crew of people that do King of Pops.
Yeah, I was going to say it's the King of Pop guys.
Yeah, that's right. That's
right.
right. So, they've helped us in the whole Southeast region, including, Whole Foods and most recently Harris Teeter and a lot of the smaller stores as well. And then we collaborate with a lot of other companies. So, for example, we work with a goat dairy farm in Tennessee that makes soap. And they have a soap bar that has our salt in it. And several chocolate companies.
I'm going to need that soap.
I think I probably have some here for you.
Oh, all right. I love this. Basically, I just drive places so I can get free things each week. Just kidding. Not really. Okay, so, these are different arms and hubs that help make your business more sustainable and more steady. Because you're not just one leg. And we are all learning about how you need to have a diversity of ways to run a business right now. So what is making you hungry?
Do you mean work hungry?
Whatever you want to answer. Some people answer literally. Some people answer metaphorically. It's whatever you'd like.
What's making me hungry is the corn that I have growing outside right now.
Yeah. What variety is it?
Gosh, I don't know. I have to ask my fiance.
Okay.
He planted it.
Well, it's not super tall.
No, it's not.
So it has to be an heirloom variety because it's a little shorter.
Yeah, we prefer heirlooms and heritage seeds.
Yes, yeah. I do too. We're like that. You made up a job that involves a lot of black plastic tubs. Basically, they're bus tubs from the restaurant supply store.
That's right.
And you've built a business around that. What is one aspect of this job that meshes with a puzzle piece with an aspect of your personality where you're like, ooh, I really like that because I like this?
Oh, that's another really good question. Well, I love to have a challenge. And, if it wasn't exciting and involving a lot of problem solving, then, and like you mentioned, a puzzle, then it would be boring, right? We really have to go through a lot of hoops with regulation, as probably do many of the people that you speak to that have to do anything with food.
Right.
And, so we're inspected by DHEC and also not DHEC, the Department of Ag and also the FDA. So we have to adhere to a lot of their guidelines. And so when you mention the bus tubs, okay, so that's a challenge for me because yes, plastic. Greenhouse covers, plastic. In other countries, you can make salt in big open, like ponds.
Right. And I've seen them almost like in wooden, like hot tub type things. Right.
And we're just not allowed to do that here. The green, the areas where the water is evaporating has to be covered. And we have to use, food grade materials and things that sometimes become a challenge when, we'd prefer obviously not to use as much plastic, but we don't really have any other option. We could use big plastic sheets and make big, pools.
Right.
But that's not really any different.
Right. It's not. No. And the sheets wouldn't be as reusable as a bus tub is. But that's an interesting thing. So dealing with that challenge and saying, I still want to do this in a very sustainable way as much as I can, but I have to adhere to this. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some things you just can't get around.
I can't get around not having cling wrap in I've done really well getting rid of baggies because I'll reuse. A lot of stuff comes in bags, and so I clean them and I'm that person. So just whatever. But cling wrap, I can't get around not having it. And that's just where I am in my kitchen So I understand that feeling. I just got something yesterday at Trader Joe's, and it was a seaweed snack. And they're packaged. And when I opened it up, they're all individually packaged, and they all have these little trays, these little plastic trays. And I was like, way too much plastic. Won't be buying these again, no matter how good they are.
Right.
I mean, these individually packaged things. It's just...
And it is hard. We don't use like plastic in our shipping. We've got these big rolls of craft paper, and it ends up costing us more. It's more money, and it's more weight in the boxes and things like that. But, we try to do what you can only do what you can do.
Right.
Try to make some smart decisions without, totally losing the plot.
Right. Right. What keeps you up at night?
Everything. I have to keep a pen and paper by my bed because I'll wake up with just the ongoing list of things that need to be done. And then I realized if I can write them down, then I can go back to sleep.
Yes. But if you don't, then you just try to repeat them so that, I'm not speaking from experience. I don't know about that.
You don't know anything about that. Depending on the time of the year, sometimes hurricanes keep me up at night because as I told you, our greenhouse number 2, we lost the cover on that one last year. It just blew right off and tore. And that was, a big problem.
Right.
And, just rebuild, things like that. General maintenance. I had to replace my trailer, the one that we haul water with last year. I had only had my previous trailer brand new for 5 years. And it was so rusty. Even, we hose it off after we use it and everything, but I was afraid to drive it anymore we haul 1,000 gallons of water at a time. And, water is more than 8 pounds per gallon. So it's a very heavy load.
Right.
And I was getting nervous about is this still safe? And so big expenses like that, things that you have to all of a sudden,
right.
Geez, I have to replace this whole thing.
Right. And what would keep me up at night right here, right now would be the fact that your goat, what is your goat's name?
Her name's Fonzie.
Fonzie is about to give birth, and I asked her to wait until after we were done recording. I was like, not right now. Mama can't handle this. I love the circle of life, but today is not the day for me. I have on white jeans.
But they're such cute little babies.
I'm sure they are. Okay. Although I'm not really good as a goat midwife, I am really good at sourcing and collecting your dream meal. So I have a magic picnic basket. I am able to time travel with it. I can source anything. I can conscript anything. So if you have a special person from your past or anything from the past, I can get it and put it in that picnic basket. We can get all your favorite things and bring it to you. What would I bring you?
Wow, that is a magic basket. Well, I think that I would probably have to go back to my childhood with some pan-seared soft-shelled crabs. And that's something that I used to do when I was a kid. I'd pull them out of the creek and just run in the house with them. My mom's like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "Ew."
She's like, "Oh no, this is not my daughter, right?" Okay, so pan-seared softies, got it.
Yeah, for sure. And a lot of fruit. I think. I suppose my favorite fruit would be a plant ripened pineapple. I have a friend that lives around here that grows some, and they take 2 years.
Wow.
2 years for one pineapple to be ripe. But the best one I ever had was plucked right off the little bush, and it was fantastic. It's summertime, so I think I'd have to stay light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Soft shell crabs and pineapple and some other fruits and veg.
Yeah. I don't know. I've really grown to eat, what's local and what's in season, as most of us do now anyway. But, any of the local heritage, grits from Geechee Boy would probably need to go in there.
You'd have to start those before you go out to the creek for the crabs.
I think you're right.
Because they take a while.
They do.
Yeah,
if you're
it's
gonna
worth
cook them
it.
Right.
That's right. That's right. Well, I can do all of that, and I won't eat a bite before I bring it to you. So if people want to learn more about Teresa and Bulls Bay Saltworks, you can go to thesouthernfork.com. I am going to, as always, have links there and a few images so you can see the face behind the voice. Also, while you're there on thesouthernfork.com, any episode that you happen to click on, there'll be other suggestions for other episodes that you might like if you like this one. I mean, I did grow up watching Reading Rainbow, so I'm always about more recommendations. But I'm so honored to come out to visit producers that are doing things that I find so delicious, but also doing it in a way that is very, very inspiring. So I hope that you subscribe, and if you're not already, and definitely share this podcast with other people, because not only are podcasts for sharing, but so is the subject of food. So thank you so much for having me in your salt shop today.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm so glad that you were here.
Me too. I'm glad we worked it out. Hello and welcome to Talking with My Mouth Full. This week, I just want to give out a grateful shout out to somebody that has worked with me behind the scenes for years. 5 years ago, plus now, almost probably 6 years ago now, I reached out to Richie Swan of Richie Swan Design Solutions and said a lot of really rambling things about starting a podcast, and I had all these ideas, and I knew I needed a logo, and I wanted to talk to him about it, and he met me at Barnes & Noble, and we talked through it, and he asked me to follow his instructions and send him ideas and also things I liked. And well, here we are 5 years later, and I can't imagine a logo that could serve me any better. So Richie and I met years ago through his work as an art director and a designer for magazine pages. Of course, publishing world people, we get to know each other. And he's been freelance for 5 years now. So just about the time I was starting the podcast, he was starting freelance design work. And I just love his work, and I am especially thankful that he didn't laugh at me when I said I wanted to do something that I hadn't done before. He said, "Okay, I can see this. Let me see if I can help you make something that will represent where you want to go." So thank you for my fork, Richie. I really appreciate it. Anybody that listens to the Southern Fork sees it every week on their podcast app. So thanks for being a great behind-the-scenes player of the Southern Fork. You've been listening to the Southern Fork. I can't wait to bring you more culinary conversations. But in the meantime, I have one question. Are you going to eat all that?